This is Studio 809.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Outdoors Hiking Bob podcast. I'm your host, Hiking Bob Falcone. You can find me on my website at hikingbob.com, where I have links to, well, just about everything. My social media, my columns at the Pikes Peak Bulletin, the other podcast, my photography website. You can subscribe to my newsletter, all that stuff. Just go to hikingbob.com. I have it laid out really nice. Look at the menu bar at the top. Everything's there. And drop me a line if you have any suggestions, comments, thoughts, insults. Well, we'll maybe leave the insults out, and do all that stuff there at hikingbob.com. Today, we're turning the tables a little bit. Instead of me being the interviewer, I am going to be the interviewee. And this is part of the couple of podcasts we're doing for the 10th anniversary of this podcast. Matter of fact, the day we're recording this is actually the day of the 10th anniversary, but we already have a podcast out, so you'll find us a couple of days after that. But my guest today, who's going to be grilling me, so today, instead of me with the bright lights and back to my old days as an investigator, me doing the grilling, I'm going to be the grillee, is Heila Ershadi, who is the editor of the Pikes Peak Bulletin, where my columns appear, and she's incredibly supportive to my writing and always encourages me to go out there and do stuff. And Heila, it is a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Bob, it is such an honor to be here. You are a local legend, and I don't know if you know this, but you were a big part of helping me get to know the Pikes Peak region when I first moved to town with 4 kids and a dog. Wasn't really expecting to land here, but a family member's health emergency brought me suddenly into town, and I didn't really know where to start in getting to know this new place that we lived in. And you were really formative in that. And I wanted to say thank you for that. I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels that way.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I hope we can talk about this with the story about the podcast, but I guess that's always been my goal behind this, was to be informative to a degree. And sometimes I hit, sometimes I miss, but I think pretty much I get that. But that's always been my goal here, is to be informative.
And you certainly have been. I mean, in addition to, I don't know how many columns that have run in various publications. This is the 479th episode of the podcast. That's incredible.
It is. It's more than 10 years. Very few podcasts actually go this long. It's just, you have the podcasts that have been out there forever. People like Joe Rogan and Murder She, My Favorite Murder, and, Dak Shepard with Armchair Expert, and obviously, This American Life, which is actually just a rebroadcast of a radio show. They've been out there a long time, but they also have, big names behind them and a lot of money behind them to support them and stuff like this. So for a little old podcast like me that operates on next to nothing for a budget, it's very unusual for it to have this many episodes and run for this long a period of time.
Yeah, I think it really speaks to your dedication and the appeal of what you are bringing to the world and how you're doing it.
Thanks.
And so it's my pleasure to get a little behind the scenes of your show and get to know you a little bit more. And I'd love for you to tell me and listeners a bit about yourself.
Well, I've been here about 35 years in Colorado Springs, so I've been here quite a while. I moved here from New Jersey, but I was introduced to the West when I was in the Air Force, and I was stationed in South Dakota for 4 years. And I didn't live in, everybody thinks of New Jersey like the beginning of Sopranos with, oil refineries and stuff. I lived in a very rural part of the state, basically farms and lots of forest and stuff like that. So I lived in a pretty rural area anyway. But, moved out here because my wife and I decided that, New Jersey, we grew up there, not too far apart from each other, and we liked it and our families were there, but we also could see the handwriting on the wall that it wasn't where we were going to want to be when we got to retirement age, where we're both at now. So I'll give you an idea how long ago we had this discussion. And the question was, well, do we move when we're young or do we wait till we retire and move? And we made the decision that maybe we should move early and kind of had to restart both of our careers. But I was a firefighter. She was a nurse. It wasn't, obviously she landed a job like in 10 seconds flat. There's never enough nurses. It took me a little longer because I had to get into the hiring cycle and testing cycle, but both ended up, where we wanted to be, and haven't looked back. I spent 4 years in the air, actually 10 years in the Air Force, 4 years active duty, 6 years as a full-time National Guardsman as a firefighter, and moved out here, fell in love with, Colorado Springs. We actually spent a month driving around the country looking for different places. We actually looked back up in South Dakota and Minnesota and different places, and Colorado Springs was the place we decided that we wanted to move to.
What was the deciding factor for you to make it the Springs?
We just loved it. It was beautiful. Right at the base of Pikes Peak. At the time, it was a much smaller town, about 250,000 people, so about half the size it is now. I liked being up in Rapid City in South Dakota, but the winters there can be pretty long and brutal. And jobs for me were going to be a little smaller because really the only full-time fire department there was Rapid City, which is a great department, but a small department, and it would probably be hard to get hired there. On the other hand, they have a huge hospital because it services hundreds of square miles up there, which would have been easy for my wife, but obviously they had plenty of hospitals down here. So we just settled on Colorado Springs. So it just was the ideal place. It had the right mix of things we were looking for: fairly low cost of living, beautiful views, not a big metropolis, a lot of open space, mountains, things that we like. So we ended up here.
Well, that was a win for Colorado Springs that you all made that decision.
Yeah,
But
the opinion might be out on that still, but we'll see.
oh, I think it's a pretty clear consensus.
Cool.
And back to your point about most people think of the city when they think of New Jersey. I 20 years ago hiked through New Jersey and definitely got to see that other side of the state. And I'd love to hear about your experiences learning to explore the great outdoors, growing up in a place that is also very, very beautiful in a different way than Colorado.
Well, I was a kid of basically the 70s. Give you an idea how far back, how old I am. But and we lived in a rural area. Our house sat on 3/4 of an acre of land, so it sat on a pretty good piece of land. And behind us was just forest. And it was a time when, a little different than now, when you would basically, your parents would tell you, get out of the house, and I'll call you when it's dinner time, kind of a thing. And we spent a lot of time outside. We spent a lot of time running around in the woods and doing stuff and riding our bikes and that kind of thing. Very low density area. It's much higher density now with population, but a very low density area at the time. And so I was used to spending a lot of time outdoors on my own, basically just doing stuff. So that was pretty much it. And it was one of those places where you had to have transportation. So we had our bikes. We were kids. We had our bikes, and we would ride all over the place. I mean, I would ride to my friend's house, who was 12 miles away, some days, and go spend a day with him, then ride all the way back. And nobody ever batted an eye. It's not like today. People get a little squishy when parents do that. But back then, we didn't, you had 3 channels on TV, and you didn't have the internet. You didn't have cell phones, and you were expected to just get out of the house and go play, and I'll call you when dinner time is. And that was pretty much it. So, and then when I moved out west, out to Rapid City, and I got to see wide open spaces and really low density populations, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, this is really kind of cool. And I really fell in love with it out here.
Yeah, that's so understandable. So how did you become hiking Bob? How did you first get into sharing your love of the outdoors with the wider world?
The advent of Twitter, I think. I wanted to start talking about the hikes I was doing, and as Facebook and Twitter came out, and I didn't want to attach it to my personal stuff, I guess. So I wanted to create a different identity on social media to post what I was doing and hiking and stuff like that. So I thought, well, what am I going to call myself? Well, I'm out hiking, I'm Bob, so I'm going to call it Hiking Bob. I'm really low on the creativity level when it comes to things like this. So I just created Hiking Bob, and it works, and it's lived ever since, and and it worked out. So I have that, that's why I have separate Facebook pages. I have separate Twitter accounts. Probably people don't even know I have a separate Twitter account, and kind of just did it from
Yeah.
there.
Twitter's X.
X, I'm sorry. Yeah. Don't
Originally.
let Elon find me, or he'll probably drop a Starlink satellite on my head or something like that.
Yeah, that.
Yeah. But so that was it. It was basically I wanted to share that kind of stuff. And Twitter, X, was kind of a new thing at the time. So a lot of people were on there, including in the local area. I know things have changed a little bit. It wasn't as partisan and as dark as it is now. It was more very informative. And just kind of took off from there, I guess. And I created a Facebook page, with Hiking Bob, and an Instagram account with Hiking Bob, and I have a Threads account now with Hiking Bob, and all those things kind of just came out of it because that was what I wanted to focus on. And I make it that it's separate. It's not, nobody cares what I think about anything else. I just want to know what I'm doing about hiking. So I leave it separate from my private stuff and just do it that way.
And I discovered you through the Colorado Springs Independent, aka the Indie. How did you get linked up with that publication?
That's an interesting story. They at one point they published an article like the 5 or 10 best hikes in Colorado Springs. And it sounded like it was written by somebody who couldn't spell hike if you spotted them the vowels, and probably had never visited Colorado Springs. And I'm not bashing the Indie. They picked it up from someplace. And I hit him on social media and I said, this article stinks. These are not the best hikes in Colorado Springs. And of course, it's just my opinion, but these are not the best hikes in Colorado Springs. 2 of these aren't even in Colorado Springs. There was a lot of things that I was critical about them with. And next thing I get a message from them, which was pretty much like, we're starting this new thing about community involvement. And I'm going to paraphrase a lot here. You've got a big mouth. Why don't you put your money where your mouth is? Why don't you write an article for us? And I have never been trained formally as a journalist. I was a firefighter. I was in law enforcement. I knew how to write really dry procedural reports. But I said, fine. With me thinking, they'll see a couple of days of me writing stuff and say, well, this idiot doesn't know what he's doing, and just move on. But they liked what I did. I figured out how to write some stuff. I had some pretty good mentors who helped me, with writing and how to put together my thoughts and everything. And I stayed there till the paper went under twice. and then you all were nice enough to pick me up after that at the Bulletin and continue to write. Somehow I figured out how to write stuff and not make myself, look any more stupid than I normally do, and just, put together thoughts and write about. And it's easy when you write about stuff that you know and that you're passionate about. If you set me out to write an article about, I don't know, a new store opening up or something like that, it would look like garbage because I don't know anything about that kind of stuff. But I know about this, and that's what I write about.
I would definitely say, as an editor, I appreciate how much, and as a reader, I appreciate how much your passion for the outdoors and the places that you're writing about really come through in your writing, and inspire myself and so many others to want to go visit these places that we may never have really done otherwise.
Well, my goal has always been with the article, and even more so with the podcast. We always worry about how overcrowded our parks and trails are, which really came to light during COVID. But my goal has always been to get people to spread out, to find other places to go, which is why this whole summer I've been writing this whole road trip series for the Bulletin, this whole series about, places that you have to drive. The one place I wrote about was a 4-hour drive, and, you really got to want it to go up there. But it's always been my goal is to write about new places for people to spread out and go to. Is to not make it feel like when you're hiking, you're in downtown, New York City. You're not hiking in Manhattan with people elbow to elbow. And then the other part of that is to talk about, how to do it safely and smartly and ethically, and how to be able to be out there and not make things bad, and how not to get yourself in trouble, and how not to get hurt. And then that extends out to with the podcast about getting into the politics of things and the reason why things happen and the behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed that your pieces are not like listicles of the 10 different places that only locals know about. And
Oh, God, I hate those articles.
oh, I have seen the damage they can do firsthand. And
Yeah.
you do always have a consistent focus on the ethics of being in the outdoors and leaving no trace and just how to behave on a trail when you're out in the backcountry or in the near country.
I'd like to think that I have a positive influence on that, yeah, both in the column and on the podcast. I'm a leave no trace believer. I'm a leave no trace trainer. And people, I volunteer at Cheyenne Mountain State Park, and one of the employees there was like, "You're like the poster child of leave no trace," because I believe it. And I'm also kind of ethically bound to it. I can't be sitting here in front of a microphone or behind a keyboard and sit there and tell you to do one thing, and then when I go out there, I don't behave the same way. So ethically, I have to behave when I'm out there just the way I tell other people to behave. So people who run into me will find out that my dog is always on leash and that I'm not leaving garbage behind and I'm not going off trail where you're not allowed to go off trail. And I'm not going past barriers that say don't go here. Because if I'm going to tell you that, I can't behave that way. I can't behave in another way. I can't. So I'm sometimes infuriatingly so to the people I go hiking with, but I'm very strict on how I have to behave when I'm out there. And I hope that that rubs off on people who see me out there. Because I just today I was out on a hike and somebody said, "Hey, you're hiking Bob." And we had a little chat for a while. And if they saw me and they related to people that they saw me, they were going to say, he had all these stuff he tells people to have, and he was on the trail and, he wasn't leaving any garbage behind. I don't want anybody to sit there and go, "Yeah, I saw that hiking Bob guy, and boy, he was just, his dog was running loose and he was dropping trash all over the place and stomping off." I don't want anybody to think that that's me. So I do what I preach people. I don't want to preach at people, but I do what I basically preach to myself. This is the way I need to behave.
Beautiful. And
Yeah.
and
I'm going to
yeah.
set an example.
Well, you are something of a local celebrity. Do you get recognized on the trail pretty often?
It happens a couple of times a month, a few times a month, where I run into somebody
Wow.
who says, "Oh, you're hiking Bob." And I know when I have a friend hiking with me, they roll their eyes like, "Oh, geez, here's another one who knows who he is."
To you. Does that feel good? Like, you're getting out there and people are
It- you
picking
know,
up
I
what you're putting down.
it's cool, and I always take time to talk to people, and I learn things from them, and hopefully they learn something from me, or we just say hi. Obviously, I don't let it go to my head. It's humbling when somebody recognizes you and says, "Oh, you're hiking Bob," and we chat for a few minutes. They're typically people who follow me on Facebook or on Instagram or something like that. So they kind of know me, or they listen to the podcast or read the columns or all of the above. So they know kind of what to expect, I think. I try to be there's a whole thing about, you know, never want to meet your heroes. Not that I'm a hero to anybody, but I kind of believe that. But I also don't want to be the person who says, "Yeah, boy, you don't ever want to meet that guy. He turned out to be a real jerk," or something like that. So I'm obviously, taken aback when somebody recognizes me, but I always want to be authentic with them and have a chat with them and maybe exchange some information or just say hi and how you doing and how you enjoying the hike and, where you guys going next and what are you doing and stuff like that. It's just fun to do that. So it's kind of cool when that happens.
Yeah, I know as somebody who also puts content out into the world, and you don't always know what kind of impact it is making. And it is meaningful when somebody comes up to you and says they appreciate what you do and that it means something to them. And I think it's probably especially in today's very online, sedentary, indoors world, to connect over the outdoors is not a small thing.
Right.
I think that's pretty powerful.
I actually am always surprised when somebody recognizes me. It's like, really, you know who I am? So, and I think that kind of keeps me a little humble too, because I don't go out, I'm never one of those, don't you know who I am kind of persons. I'm very, if nobody knows who I am, that's fine. If somebody recognizes me, that's awesome. But I never go out there expecting everybody like, don't you know who I am kind of a thing, because that'd just be, I hate
Well,
that in others, so it's not going to be me.
well, Yes, no one that has interacted with you would ever say you were anything other than humble. Um, what when did that start? I mean, you've been doing this well over a decade now of putting your stories out, and you're 10 years now with the podcast. When did people start coming up to you and saying, "Hey, you're Hiking Bob"?
It started when I started making TV appearances. Fox 21 years ago asked me to come on. I forget what, I don't even remember what it was, on their morning show, and I just did their morning show today. Did their Loving Living Local show, which I've been on a number of times, and the morning news show that comes on before that, where I've done other pieces for them, and I've done stuff for other TV stations too. But then your face gets out there, and people actually get to see you. It's one thing when you're on Facebook. And I don't do those. I do those a couple of times a year. A lot of times around, hey, winter's coming. Let's get ready for winter hiking, or the summer heat is coming. And the last one I did before today's was we talked about the upcoming monsoon season, and the weather's going to change and how to be safe. And we haven't had a real monsoon season in several years. So if you've only been here a few years, you don't know what that's like, and talk about that kind of stuff. So I think that's where they started to put a face to things and started to know who I was. And a lot of times, however, since I hike a lot with my dog Cole, a lot of times it's like, that's Cole. So you must be Bob, which is just awesome too. I mean, it's great when they recognize Cole. And today I was even asked, where's Cole? I said, he's home today. But
Is too.
oh yeah, he actually has his own Instagram page, which I haven't posted anything on in ages, but he actually has
Oh,
his own
nice.
Instagram page.
So across all of your platforms, how many people follow you directly that way? Do you have a sense?
It's not like a huge number. It's not like a Joe Rogan number or anything like that, but it's in it. I think it's around 4,000 or so that are actually listed as followers. I'm sure a lot of other people see my content or listen to my podcast that aren't followers per se, but they see it. So, how many actually do are there interactions with? I have no idea. I mean, there's really I've tried to look at those algorithms and statistics, and it doesn't make any sense to me. But actual followers, I think it's around 4,000 or so, which, like I said, not a tremendous number, but my stuff tends to be very local. So, most everybody's right around here. There are people from other parts of the country that follow me, but most of the people are, within Colorado at least.
I would say that the number of people that recognize you and come up to you is a better gauge than pure social media numbers, because that is what it is. But I think that the in-person interactions that you get on a regular basis, where people recognize you and know your work, that's really, I think, the key indicator of the impact that you're having.
Last year, I had some friends visiting from back east, people, I went to school with, and they were visiting here, and they were spending a week here, and I took them up to Pikes Peak, and on the way back, we pulled off on the side trail, and, showing them this trail that's, not all that popular, and there was somebody else there, and he goes, "You're hiking Bob," and my friend's like, "You've got to be kidding me. You're in the middle of nowhere, and this guy recognizes you." Like, it happens. So yeah, I mean, it's cool when it happens. Like I said, would I like to have 40,000 followers? It probably would be cool, but I don't know what I would do with that. I don't think you do anything with it. You just put your stuff out there, hope people like it, and they get something useful out of it, and actually decide to follow you, and see what happens.
Yeah. Well, since this is the podcast anniversary episode, let's talk a little bit more about the podcast. How did that get started, and how has it evolved over the years?
Well, I was already doing the column at the Independent and had my Facebook and my X account out there, and podcasting was pretty new at 10 years old, and there was a local community radio station that was starting up, KCMJ. And I was thinking about getting a show on there, which would have been a way to get into podcasting. Do a half-hour radio show, record it, then put it back out as a podcast. Well, things happened, and the radio station never really went anywhere. But Dave Gardner, who was one of the guys who was kind of behind KCMJ, called me out of the blue one day and says, "You still want to do a podcast?" I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, I'm starting Studio 809 podcast. Why don't you come over and join us?" So sure, I was all over that. signed up with them, you kind of just joined the co-op basically, and learn from him about how to do podcasting. Because again, here I am doing something I had no training in. I wasn't trained as a journalist. I certainly wasn't trained as a radio announcer or, anything like that. And basically, I don't think it's changed a whole lot. If you go back and listen to my first bunch of episodes, they were recordings I was doing, interviews I was doing with people connected with outdoor recreation. My first one was with Susan Davies, who at the time was the executive director of Trails and Open Space Coalition. And I just, the 10th anniversary one, I brought her back in and we talked about what we did over the last 10 years. I don't know that it's evolved a whole lot other than I got a bigger following. So now I'm getting requests to be on the podcast from a wider area. I'm getting book authors whose publishers send me their books and want to know if I want to have them on the podcast, and things like that. I've got Alicia Philly, who is a physical therapist in Texas, but she does everything about hiking. She's on the podcast a couple times a year, and we talk about that. So that's gotten bigger. So I've gotten used to bringing in people or reaching out outside the local area and bringing people in. But other than that, I've tried to keep it pretty much the same. It's non-political other than topics related to outdoor recreation. I never endorse candidates. I don't even talk to political candidates on here. I talk to politicians when they're in office because then they're affecting things. But other than issues that affect outdoor recreation, I don't even get into politics. I'm just not interested in that. I just want to talk one-on-one with the listener about things that they might be interested in.
Yeah, and the articles and podcast episodes, they're different. They're related, but I'd love for you to expound a bit more on the difference between the two.
Well, the podcasts are more a chance for me to just voice my opinion about things or to go off on, having interviews of people. I'm not good at doing an interview and putting it down on paper. But if I record it, then it's just you're hearing their voice. I almost never edit podcast other than for pauses or things like that, just to make them more listenable. But I don't take people's questions out or reorganize things. And also for the newspaper, such as the Bulletin, and before that, the Indy, my opinion may not be in line with the newspaper's opinion. So I don't want to post anything I'm not there to be an opinion writer. I'm not an editorial writer. I'm there to provide some content for outdoor recreation. So the articles for the newspaper and the magazines I write for are more like, here's a place to go, or here's what to do, or here's how to be prepared. Pretty evergreen stuff. And I talk about a lot of that on the podcast. But on the podcast, we go into more things. We do get a little opinionated sometimes, especially when I see trends in funding, for example, that don't go the way I like. And I get to be a little more opinionated. And the guests I bring on, I get to bring guests on it and talk to them. So it's not just me just talking. So are they related? Yeah, kind of. But are they? I try to keep the two things separate. I'm not going to write an article for the Bulletin and then come on here and read the article. That's not going to be, nobody's going to want to see that. Yeah.
What are some of the outdoor issues that have gotten you really fired up over the years? And is there anything like that on your radar right now?
The biggest thing is, of course, you'll hear this from everybody involved in outdoor recreation, is funding. I'm disappointed in the fact that, especially here locally in Colorado Springs, when there's a funding issue, the first thing that gets cut is the Parks Department. And to give you some retrospect on how that is when we had the Great Recession, was that 2008? The Parks Department was cut drastically. I mean, it almost didn't exist. Funding for the Parks Department is still not where it was prior to the Great Recession. And it got cut again this year. And this is right after the mayor on my podcast told me he was going to treat the Parks Department as a critical infrastructure. And then that made it for about a year. Then after that, I was like, well, not so much. We're going to cut the heck out of the Parks Department. So, and my beef with that, I get it. I understand how things work. And I was a public safety person, so I understand public safety is important and has to come first. But as a place where we invite people to come here and enjoy our parks and our open spaces and our trails, and then we cut them so that the people we invite to come here and spend money and visit our city then don't have a place to go to the bathroom because we pulled all the porta potties out of there, and the grass looks terrible. And by cutting staff and by cutting those things, we're also inviting crime. So yeah, you talk a lot about public safety, but by doing these things, you're actually not increasing safety. You're actually making things less safe, because when you create an environment where a place looks like it's neglected, then people who do want to do bad things are going to think that nobody cares, and they're going to have free reign over that, and then you're playing catch up. So
Yeah. As a mom who takes kids to parks, when there's not a bathroom, that doesn't mean the kid doesn't need to go.
right.
It means we're like stuck with either possibly having an accident or going in the bushes, neither of which are great. So
right, and then
yeah,
people complain about people going. Yeah, people complain about people going to the bathroom in the bushes. Well, what do you want them to do? You don't give them bathrooms. It's one thing if it's a little pocket park in the neighborhood that only the locals use, they can go home. But like 2 parks near in my neighborhood, one of them has tennis courts. It used to have a pool, but the pool is sinking into the ground, so it's been closed for years, and a baseball field. The other one has a picnic area. They're places where people come from outside the neighborhood, so they just can't run home if they have to do something. And the one park with the picnic area and the pavilion doesn't even have a bathroom. So I don't know what happens when people go in there and having a picnic and eating and drinking and what they do. So I just, that's always been my biggest thing with that. And then I have beef with people who just misbehave out there. But that's a one-on-one thing. I get disappointed when our government fails us in providing good services for the people.
Yeah, understandable. Well, you're a strong advocate, and the many of us who care about those issues also appreciate that.
Cool. Yeah, I hope to be a voice out there for people who don't know how to voice their opinions.
Switching gears a little bit, what do you think are some of the best episodes of this podcast of all time, and why are they the best?
After doing so many of them, it's hard to say this one was the best or that one was the best, because I don't remember all of them that well. I'd have to go back and listen to them. It's been a lot. 400. One of the most popular ones was when I went out on a ride with a Forest Service law enforcement officer. Portable recorder, it's all I had. I had a GoPro, which I didn't end up recording anything with. And we drove around for almost 12 hours on his patrol, and we interacted with people who were camping illegally or shooting illegally or just checking in on things and just patrolling and getting an idea how vast it was. That was very popular because people really we were recording in real time. We would stop and interact with somebody, and I turned the recorder on, and then we got back in the car. We talked a little bit about what just happened there. I think that was one of the more popular ones, and I definitely enjoyed it. And as being a former public safety person and in law enforcement and in fire protection, I got a feel for what's going on there. So I can kind of see what's happening. But relaying that to people who are now, wow, that's really what's going on out there, and this is what's happening. And we talked a lot about what also happens out there that we didn't encounter that day, but they do encounter out there. That was one of my favorites because it was very popular and it really resonated. I got a lot of feedback on that when the people were really excited to hear what's actually going on out there.
And if listeners to this episode want to hear that one, it is episode 378, and they can find it on this Studio 809 or on your website.
Yeah. Yeah, just go to my website, you'll see it, and just go down the list, you'll find it.
And you also recently did a podcast, the one or two before this one, on your 10 favorite hikes over the last 10 years. And so not to repeat that episode too much, but in keeping with this 10-year anniversary, what are some of your favorite hikes?
That came about because of a listener, because we were asking the listeners, what do you want to hear? And the listener suggested that. So it's like, this is a great idea. What are the 10 favorite? So I did it year by year, 2016 to 2026. And one comment I did get back after somebody listened to that goes, there were not a lot of them in Colorado, which is like, I got a couple in there from Colorado. There were hikes I did in Iceland where it was a short hike on a nondescript island, but I walked across the Arctic Circle. So I walked across the line where the Arctic Circle was. Now, who gets to say that they did that? The people in Alaska get to say they do it. People in the Northwest Territories, in Canada get to say they do that. But how many people actually get to say they do this? So it was my favorite hike, not because it's the most beautiful hike or it was only 2.5 miles round trip or something, but because it was just an exciting thing to be able to say that you did. And I have pictures of me, walking across the line and stuff. And then one of them was a hike I did earlier this year, which I wrote about in the bulletin, about hiking up to Lake Agnes in State Forest State Park.
Yeah.
A stunningly beautiful short hike with some of the best photos I've taken in ages at that hike. So I loved it because it was just so beautiful. And it's a nothing hike. It's a short hike, 2 miles round trip, but boy, was it gorgeous. So that ranks up on my list. So there's a lot of stuff like that. And I do it year by year, which was really interesting. Kevin did it a little differently. He just did his 10 favorites over the last 10 years. They're not necessarily one for each year. But I thought it would be fun to so I'm going through my spreadsheet for each year, or scrolling down, which one did I like that year, and just kind of doing it that way.
That's amazing. And yes, you can, listeners, check out Hiking Bob's columns at pikespeakbulletin.org. The pictures that he was just talking about, they really are incredible.
And I also have a page on my website where you can click on columns, and I have all the Pikes Peak Bulletin columns on there too. Yeah.
Yeah, your website is definitely, I think, the go-to place to get. It's kind of all in one place there. So
I tried to make it a hub for everything.
Yes. I see a theme with your service in the Air Force and your work as a firefighter, and then your media career as the outdoor adventurer and advocate Hiking Bob. And to me, it looks like different expressions of what one might call love of country. And I'm curious if you see that through line in your life's achievements.
Not intentionally, but yeah, I mean, I have it kind of in my DNA to help people. Now, I'm the first person in my family to have become a public servant. I was the first person in my family to become a firefighter and an EMT and involved in law enforcement when I was in the Air Force. My first term in the Air Force, I was in law enforcement. And then later on in my career as a firefighter, I was an arson investigator. So I had a lot of law enforcement training and background and, investigating and prosecuting crimes and stuff like that. But I've always had it kind of in my DNA that I've always wanted to be the person who helps people. So I've always been that kind of a person. I've helped people out on trails and stuff like that. So yeah, I guess there is that common theme about, how can I help? As a matter of fact, this is going to sound really dumb, but there was that show on TV a couple of years ago called New Amsterdam. And the doctor on that show, his thing was, how can I help? And I actually had wristbands made for a while that said, how can I help? Because that just resonated with me, that when I run into somebody, one of the things I should be prepared to ask or do is, how can I help? So I guess I've always wanted to be, or it's just built into me to always want to help people. I don't get in the way of people. If they're fine, they're fine. But, if I see something, is there a way I can help, and what can I do to help? Sometimes the best way to help is to stay out of the way. But sometimes it's just, how can I help? So I do that by giving people advice on how to be prepared for hiking and how to stay safe while hiking and how not to get in trouble while hiking and, what to do if you do get in trouble. When I say trouble, I mean, get into a situation or something. And having had the one time get rescued myself by search and rescue, being prepared and doing all those things that I told other people to do made that a much easier issue than it would have been if I wasn't, in that frame of mind about helping and being a help to other people.
Thanks, Bob. We're getting pretty close to our time goal for the show. And is there anything else that you want listeners to know?
Well, I hope people listen to the podcast. I hope more people listen to it. I hope more people read my columns at the Bulletin. You guys have been great with helping me out and printing my articles. I hope, people just follow me. The big thing is we're always looking for suggestions on either topics to discuss on the podcast or a guest to have on the podcast. So if you know somebody who's doing something great in outdoor recreation, or if you know of a topic that I haven't covered before, and even though it's a hiking podcast, I have a lot of people from the cycling community on the podcast in the past, and we always will feature cycling and other sports out there. But if you have a topic you want to hear or a person you want to hear on the podcast, by all means, drop me a line. Go to the website, click on the Contact Bob page, fill out the form, drop me a line, DM me on the social medias. I look at everything, and we'll see what we can do. Maybe I can do it, maybe I can't, but I'll at least give it a try.
Hiking Bob Falcone, it's been such a pleasure to talk with you today.
Well, Heila, it's been great being interviewed. I wasn't sure how that would go over, but of course you made it very easy to do. And, you and I have talked a little bit in the past, but you've made it very easy to answer questions. And I hope people got something new out of this.
I hope people have as much fun listening as I have had talking with you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
And everybody, Heila, if you don't have any more questions, I guess we'll say we're good.
Yeah, I think that was great.
Awesome. Well, everybody, thank you for listening to the Outdoors Hiking Bob podcast, the Tables Reversed edition, and we'll talk to you next time.